Hello and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. Today we're going to be talking all about home buying and how to determine how much home you can afford. My name is Paige and I am an event manager at SoFi. I'm excited to introduce today's guest speaker. He is a certified financial planner and the head of our financial planning team at SoFi. Welcome, Brian Walsh.
Thanks for having me.
Brian, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about home buying, and it seems like the home buying market is on fire right now. Before you even begin your home search, what are the things that you should be doing to determine how much you can afford when it comes to buying your first home?
Yeah, I think that question is a great place to start. First, you should take a step back and think what your price range is going to be before you start looking at houses. So as you think about doing that, you should start with your budget. Think about how much you can actually afford related to paying for your mortgage, your property taxes, your insurance, all those types of things on what's going to fit in your budget, and then use that to back into that ideal purchase price. You don't want to start with the max amount that a lender may approve you for, because that's a good way to, get in a position of being house poor. And the reason it's so important to kind of start with your budget and figure out what that purchase price is going to be is then you're going to be looking at houses in that price range, not looking at prices that maybe cost $100,000 or $200,000 more, and then being disappointed when you kind of go back into your price range and are a little bit tempted to overspend.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Brian. So now that we know how much home you can afford, how much is needed for a down payment? Often we hear 20%, but can you put down more? Can you put down less? What are your insights?
Yeah, so really where that 20% rule of thumb comes from is the general idea that you put down 20% and you will avoid paying PMI, or private mortgage insurance, which essentially is an expense that you more or less are going to pay that doesn't really do much for you. So it can be pretty costly. At the same time, if you think about the housing market right now and how expensive houses are, especially in markets like San Francisco, New York, places like that, putting down 20% can be pretty much unfeasible for a lot of different people. So a good target's 20%, but sometimes depending on the market and depending on your financial situation, 5%, 10%, 15% can make just as much sense. Really the key is going back to the budget and making sure that based on your down payment and your purchase price, that your overall payments, including any incidental expenses, are going to fit comfortably in your budget.
That's great insights, Brian. Are there any other costs that you should consider? Incidentals, closing costs?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on what type of house you're buying. Maybe if you're building a house, you may have a little bit less cost to worry about for ongoing maintenance. But if you're buying an existing home, you should plan on things going wrong. You're going to have to make renovations. You're going to have to replace the furnace. You're going to have to fix a roof. So generally speaking, we look at planning about 1, maybe 2% of the purchase price towards incidentals that are going to come up. Also, you're going to have property taxes, you're going to have utilities, you're going to have landscaping, you're going to have all the expenses that come with the responsibility of owning a home. So you should probably factor in not only that emergency fund, but that extra cushion to cover those types of incidental expenses.
That's great advice. So do you have any tips to help people better manage their cash flow in anticipation for purchasing their home and paying for their mortgage or other home-related expenses?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different ways that you can go about managing your expenses and overall just reducing your expenses. One way, and probably is the most important way, is to look at your big ticket items. A lot of times people spend the most money on transportation and housing. So take a look at how much you're spending on a car or whatever, however else you get around. Make sure you keep your housing budget in check. Then beyond that, then you can look at those incidental expenses or those smaller expenses. Look at subscription services, look at how much you go out to eat, how much you go out to the bar. Ultimately, you should think about those things and how they really all add up, track your spending, and then find ways to reduce along the way.
That's great. So let's say someone's in the market to purchase a home in a year or less. What are the things that they should be doing to optimize their finances?
Yeah, so the first thing that they should be doing is making sure they have a properly funded emergency fund. Generally speaking, that's going to be 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. And the reason why that's so important is because as you take on more responsibility in owning a home, it's amazing, but things are going to go wrong. So you want to have that cash to fall back on. Another thing you're going to want to make sure to do is that you eliminate any bad debt or any debt that has an interest rate greater than 7% before purchasing the home, because that just adds a little bit extra risk to your financial scenario. Beyond that, you could go through test driving your new payment to make sure it fits into your budget if you're a little bit unsure on if you could handle the additional payments for the mortgage and property taxes and stuff like that.
That's great. So on the flip side, somebody who's looking to purchase a home greater than a year from now, should they be doing anything differently with their finances?
Yeah, I think some of the same principles stand, where you want to make sure that you're building up to having that emergency fund and reviewing your debt to make sure you don't have bad debt. But the simple fact is you may have more time. So it gives you some additional flexibility to save up more money for your down payment, because you don't want to use your emergency fund to make your down payment. Because if you deplete your emergency fund for your down payment and then something goes wrong, then you're turning to credit cards. And that can get into a kind of a slippery slope and really impact your finances. So it just gives you more time to save up for that down payment.
Okay, last question for you here, Brian. As someone who recently purchased a home yourself, any words of advice that you can give to people who are buying their first or their next home?
Yeah, I think number one, do not underestimate all the incidentals that come with purchasing a home. Think about landscaping, furniture. Anytime you go to Target, you're not going to spend $20, you're going to spend $200, unless that's just me. Number two would be making sure that you really kind of plan out and you think about your property taxes and your utilities. It's something that really helped us budget, where we kind of planned it out and it was pretty close, and we didn't see any shocks to our spending because that could have put us in a tough spot.
Brian, as always, this has been incredibly helpful. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you, SoFi members, for tuning in today. We look forward to having you join us for another financial fireside chat soon. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks for having me.